What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman back at it again with another video. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Buffalo Bills must have their final 53-man roster submitted. Right now is when I'm going to predict who the Buffalo Bills are going to be keeping for the final 53. They've already began to release a few guys this morning prior to me recording this video, and I wouldn't be surprised if by the time this video was released, there were a couple more cuts. But there's no reason to waste anyone's time here. We're going to hop right into it with the offensive side of the ball, starting with the quarterbacks. We're going to go with Josh Allen and Case Keenum, of course. For the running backs, I have 5 guys sticking around in Devin Singletary, James Cook, Zach Moss, Tywan Jones, and Reggie Gilliam, who's going to be more of a fullback. But nevertheless, if you've watched my content throughout the offseason, you would know that I am not a big fan of Zach Moss. I really don't think he's got a place on this team. But based on everything I'm reading and all the predictions of the guys that are extremely smart in this community, it seems like Zach Moss is here to stay. And I would say based on his usage in the preseason, I 100% agree with that. Although there are 2 things I'm interested to see playing out with the running back room. The first one being whether or not fan-favored undrafted free agent rookie Raheem Blackshear, who I do not have making this roster, ends up getting claimed by another team. I do think it's very possible that Raheem Blackshear gets claimed, but I'm going to lean more toward the fact that he will end up on our practice squad. Most teams have their backfields filled out at this point. And the other thing I wonder with the running backs is whether or not Zach Moss is still a potential trade piece. I think there probably was a period of time where he was being shopped, or at least they were taking calls for him. I'm not sure if that's still the case right now. I know a big reason for that is because Devin Singletary is going to his final year on his contract, but it does make me think where they're at with Zach Moss. I guess we'll come to find out. Now for the tight ends, I have the Buffalo Bills hanging on to 3 tight ends, being Dawson Knox, OJ Howard, as well as Quintin Morris. Dawson Knox is the obvious lock. OJ Howard is somebody that not a lot of people know how they truly should feel about at the moment, but we know he's going to have a relatively decent cap hit at about $3.5 million. So I think for that reason, primarily, he is going to be sticking around, and we're going to be seeing what he has to offer us despite not having a great preseason. Out of himself, Tommy, and Quintin, he's definitely got the highest upside, especially in terms of a receiving tight end. Not sure if he's been playing injured or not. I've been seeing that rumor float around. He also can block. He just doesn't have much special teams appeal, which is the big caveat with him at the moment. But nevertheless, I do have him making the roster despite not having a great preseason. Then I have Quintin Morris being the 3rd tight end that makes this roster. He's definitely got enough offensive appeal, knowing that Ken Dorsey's probably going to want to roll out in some 12 personnel this season. The biggest thing with him is his versatility to play special teams. Unlike OJ Howard, like I mentioned, Quintin Morris can play that special teams role, and he can do it pretty damn well. And we all know how this front office looks at special teamers. They love them. And that leaves Tommy Sweeney on the outside. I don't think Tommy Sweeney really provides much to this team that neither of the other 2 guys do. I could not stand the fact that we kept Tommy Sweeney over Jacob Hollister last year. Like, I was pissed off about that. So with that being said, I got Dawson Knox, OJ Howard, and Quintin Morris making it, cutting Tommy Sweeney, but I gotta tell you, I am not too confident in our tight end depth. This is one area of our roster we definitely need to improve looking into the future. I'm moving to the offensive line. This is where things could get a little bit sketchy because there are a couple guys that might require some roster gymnastics, but I'll get to that in just a second. The 9 guys that I have making it on the offensive line are Dion Dawkins, Roger Saffold, Mitch Morse, Ryan Bates, David Questenberry, Greg Van Roten, Greg Mance, Spencer Brown, and Tommy Doyle. There's a lot going on here, and as I mentioned, some roster gymnastic possibilities, and I do predict some roster gymnastics happening here, and that would be cutting Bobby Hart, who I think has earned a roster spot. Since he is a vested veteran, I think we cut Bobby Hart and then we move Greg Mance to the IR. And being that vested veteran, Bobby Hart will come back to the Buffalo Bills, so it'll be a short-term cut. But what threw things for a loop with the offensive line was the final preseason game when we didn't see Greg Van Roten at all. And typically when a player doesn't play in the final preseason game and not a single snap, that means that they are pretty much indicated to be making the roster. And that caught a lot of people by surprise, including myself. And Locked On Bills podcast host Joe Marino has inspired this kind of thinking here, having Bobby Hart be cut and then have him brought back after Greg Mance moved to IR. Oh, and Ike Boettger makes the PUP list, which is probably something I did not have to mention. But nevertheless, I know a lot of people out there right now are still just outright cutting Van Roten despite the preseason confusion. That's a tidbit I'm going to hang on to, and this is the route that I think the Bills are going to take come tomorrow at 4 p.m. Now, moving on to the wide receivers, which is easily the most anticipated group on the team right now. Nobody knows what's going to happen here, but I have us keeping 7 wide receivers: Stefon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakir, Jamison Crowder, Isaiah Hodgins, and Jake Kumerow. So we keep 7 wide receivers. Will it come down to 6, and Jake Kumerow and Isaiah Hodgins will be battling it out? All of these questions are things that rattled around in my brain, but I came to the conclusion that all 7 of these guys provide something to the Buffalo Bills that they will heavily value, not to mention they won't want to expose them to other teams. They've held on to Isaiah Hodgins for a few years now, and we've finally seen an emergence, he's finally showed some flashes and really dominated. I would use the word dominate in the preseason to a point where it's kind of hard to let go of him. I've been waiting for the time where he was, one, healthy, and two, able to show something to where they're able to keep him. He's finally been able to do both of those things, and I can't imagine they're going to end up cutting him. So with that being said, I have them keeping 7 wide receivers. I guess the only somewhat surprise cut here would be Marquez Stevenson. I don't even view that as a surprise. The guy, 1, can't stay healthy. 2, I don't think seized his opportunity nearly as much as he could have. Moving on to the defense, we're going to go to the secondary first, starting with the safeties. I think this is probably the most predictable room that we have outside of the quarterback position. Damar Hamlin, Jaquan Johnson, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer. Both Damar Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson really impressed throughout preseason, especially Jaquan Johnson. He was getting in the face of a lot of big players at the line of scrimmage, and he was not backing down from contact. That's something you really like to see from a young safety. Same with Damar Hamlin, and he made a few tackles on special teams that really caught my eye, so he's 100% going to be making this roster as well. That's an easy 4 guy. But for the cornerbacks, I really don't think there's much up for debate at this point either. I have Christian Benford, Kyrie Elam, Dane Jackson, Teron Johnson, Saran Neal, and Cam Lewis being the 6 corners that make it. Tre'Davious White being put on the PUP list. Do not think he's going to be ready for week 1. And that really shouldn't come to a surprise for anyone. I was thinking at the beginning of the offseason, we would be seeing Tre'Davious White mid-October, maybe early November. So I would say, at least in terms of my projections, he is relatively on track and ahead of schedule. So that leaves the other 6 that are making the roster relatively unanimous. Christian Benford and Kyrie Elam, the 2 2022 draft picks that are drawing a lot of hype in this secondary. I mean, we already have one of the best in the league, and we're just adding those 2 talents to it. It's kind of ridiculous. Moving on to the defensive line, another positional group which I really don't think has much up for debate, despite it being a big group itself. I got 9 guys making it: Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Von Miller, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, Shaq Lawson, AJ Epinesa, and Boogie Basham. Throughout preseason, there were a couple potential what-ifs, like Mike Love, Brandon Bryant were kind of in that conversation, but otherwise, I really don't think they did enough to make the cut. Shaq Lawson was somebody that was considered on the bubble at one point, but that was a ridiculous statement. Finally, I left one of the more controversial groups for last on the defensive side of the ball, the linebacker group. I got 5 making it: Tyrell Dodson, Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, and Tyler Metakevich. This really hurts my heart because I was a big Balen Spector fan throughout all preseason. I still am. I'm going to have to cut him with the hopes that he ends up making it through waivers and getting on the practice squad. I just got to have my fingers crossed. Moving into the specialist unit, we got kicker Tyler Bass, we got long snapper Reed Ferguson. The punter, as we know, is up for grabs at the moment. But I will say, as I was recording this video, the Tennessee Titans decided who was going to be their starting punter. They're holding on to the rookie that they drafted, and they're releasing Brett Kern. Brett Kern is a former All-Pro punter. He's been doing it for at least 13 years. This guy is definitely somebody that fits the description of a Super Bowl caliber football team. And now that he's no longer with the Titans, he's definitely the #1 candidate to be getting this job, and I'm going to be predicting him to be our punter going into 2022. So yeah, that will round out my 53-man roster projection for the Buffalo Bills going into 2022. Remember some of the roster gymnastics that I have in mind here. But as always, if you enjoyed, please like, subscribe, do all the fun stuff. If you want to hit the bell to be notified when I upload, I'd appreciate that. You want to go over to Twitter, follow me over there, I'd appreciate that as well. I have a TikTok down in the description that I think you should check out, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.